I had been awake since 4 in the morning on Wednesday, standing in my kitchen in wool socks and an old apron I've had since college, basting a turkey that had been sitting in brine since Monday night. By Thursday afternoon, when I loaded everything into the back of my car, the 14-pound bird, the green bean casserole, homemade cranberry sauce, 2 pies, a full pot of mashed potatoes still warm, and a basket of honey wheat rolls, I'd finished shaping at midnight. I was tired in the way that only comes from pouring everything you have into something you're genuinely proud of. I drove 45 minutes to my in-laws' house in Westerville. 40 minutes later, I was pulling out of their driveway with every single dish still in my car. 4 hours after that, my husband showed up at my mother's front door. His coat was half on. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd been standing in the wrong room for a very long time. And right behind him, my phone rang. What I said when I answered it, 3 quiet words, nothing dramatic, made everyone in my mother's kitchen stop talking at once. But I'll get there. My name is Stella. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a registered nurse at a hospital about 20 minutes from our house in Columbus. My husband Lucas is 37. We've been married 6 years. Our daughter Poppy just turned 4, and she has her father's eyes and my stubbornness, which he reminds me of regularly. From the outside, I think we look like a pretty ordinary family, and we mostly are. The thing about my in-laws, the thing that's hard to explain to people, is that nothing they ever did was big enough to point to. It wasn't yelling. It wasn't exclusion. It was the kind of thing that only makes sense if you've lived inside it. A comment here, a comparison there. Things that, if you mention them at a dinner party, people would probably say, well, maybe she didn't mean it like that. She probably didn't. That's the hardest part. Linda, my mother-in-law, is 62. She grew up without much in a small town in central Ohio, and has spent the last 30 years making sure her house looks like she grew up with plenty. She's not mean. She's careful. She cares enormously about what other people think, and that care spills outward onto everyone around her. Cassie, Lucas's younger sister, is 29. She and I get along fine on the surface. She texts me funny videos sometimes. She remembered Poppy's birthday this year, but she has this habit I've noticed for years, mentioning Lucas's ex-girlfriend in a way that isn't accidental. Her name was Ryan. They dated for 3 years before Lucas and I met. I have never actually met her. Some days it feels like I have. Warren, my father-in-law, barely speaks. But he has never once been unkind, and that has always mattered to me. Early in our marriage, I brought a blueberry buckle to Sunday dinner that came out too sweet. Too much sugar, not enough lemon, I knew immediately. And Linda set her fork down after 1 bite. Warren ate 2 pieces and said afterward it reminded him of something his mother used to make. I don't know if that was true, but I've thought about it many times since. That Thanksgiving, I had a plan. I'd gotten a quarterly bonus from the hospital in October, not huge, around $800, and I decided to put some of it toward making a real dinner. The kind my mother made when I was growing up, where the whole house smelled like sage and brown butter for 2 days, and you could feel the warmth of the oven from the living room. I wanted to bring that to Lucas's family. I don't entirely know why it still mattered to me by year 6, but it did. I started the brine Monday night. I made the cranberry sauce Tuesday. Fresh cranberries, orange zest, a little maple syrup. The pies came out of the oven Wednesday evening. I was still shaping rolls at midnight, while Lucas sat at the kitchen table, pretending to read and actually just watching me, the way he does when something is happening that he doesn't quite understand yet. You don't have to do all this, he said. I want to, I told him, and I meant it. I want to say that clearly because I think it matters. I was not being naive. I knew how Linda could be. I knew Cassie would probably say something that landed sideways. I made all of it anyway because I was in a good mood, and I had 2 days off and my kitchen smelled incredible. And sometimes that's enough reason to try. We arrived at the house at 1 in the afternoon on Thursday. Poppy ran ahead and rang the doorbell 3 times. Lucas carried the turkey. I had 2 bags in one hand and a pie tin balanced on each arm. Linda opened the door and looked immediately at the pie tin closest to my face, not at me, at the tin. You brought 2 pies? Pumpkin and apple, I said. She made a small sound, not quite a word, not quite a nothing, and stepped back to let us in. Cassie was in the living room with her boyfriend Todd, a quiet guy I'd met once before who seemed genuinely nice. She glanced up at the bags as I set them on the kitchen counter. Wow, you really went all out. It was fun, I said. She smiled, then back to her phone. Do you do stuffed mushrooms? Ryan used to make this incredible stuffed mushroom thing every year. Goat cheese and herbs. Lucas, you remember, the guests always asked for the recipe. Lucas, who was setting the turkey on the counter, said he didn't remember. I made cranberry sauce, I said, because I needed to say something. Yeah. She was already scrolling again. She would have done mushrooms, though. I told myself to let it go. I've had 6 years of practice. You get good at recognizing the moment, that small scratch across the surface of something, and just breathing through it. I got the turkey into the oven. I arranged the sides in the refrigerator. I set the roll basket on the counter. Warren came through the kitchen, gave me a nod, poured himself a coffee, and went back to the living room. That was normal for him. Linda hovered. She picked up the roll basket and turned it over the way someone does at a store when they're checking for damage. Did you make these yourself? Yes. Honey wheat. She set the basket down. Ryan's mother always brought those brown and serve ones from the bakery on 5th Avenue. The ones with the flaky tops? Her voice was soft and wistful, like she was remembering something deeply lovely. People always loved those. I stood very still for a moment. Then Warren's brother and his wife arrived with their teenage son. The noise level shifted upward, and I went back to checking the turkey. The next half hour was polite. We stood around the appetizers, a cheese log and crackers Linda had picked up at Kroger, and talked about the drive, about football, about whether it was supposed to snow. I held Poppy on my hip. She'd brought a stuffed giraffe. Warren's sister-in-law asked who made the rolls on the counter, and before I could answer, Linda said, Stella brought them. She does everything from scratch. She's very ambitious. There was a small, easy laugh. Nobody directed it at anyone in particular. Cassie, from the couch. Lucas, do you remember what Ryan called that mushroom thing? Was it a crostini? It had brie, I think. Guests always wanted the recipe. Lucas said he really didn't remember. I was looking at Poppy. She was making the giraffe walk across my sleeve. Then Linda came back through the room and said, almost to herself but very much to the room, the rolls are a little dense. Did they proof long enough? She wasn't looking at me when she said it. She was slicing the cheese log. I heard Cassie make a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite anything else. I've thought about that moment a lot since then. What I felt wasn't the hot rush of anger I always imagined would come. The moment everything spilled out, what I actually felt was quiet, calm, like something had simply settled into place. I set Poppy gently on the couch beside her dad. I walked into the kitchen. I started putting lids on things. Linda came in a few minutes later. The turkey has another hour. I know, I said, I'm taking it with me. She stared at me. What? I'm taking the food. All of it. I kept my voice even. You mentioned Ryan's rolls twice. You mentioned her mushrooms. I think for tonight you'd be more comfortable with food from somewhere else. She didn't speak. I wrapped the first pie. Stella, her voice had changed, smaller. I'm not upset, I told her. And that was the strangest part. I really wasn't. I was just tired. Tired in a way I hadn't let myself name until right then. Tired of making something good and watching it get turned over in someone's hands like it might not be good enough. Lucas appeared in the doorway. He saw me wrapping the second pie, his mother standing with her hands at her sides, and he went very still. Stella, I'm bringing this to my mom's. You're welcome to stay here. I tied off the bag of rolls. I'll take Poppy. He looked at his mother. He looked at me. I waited for the thing that always happened. The gentle mediation, the you know how she is, the careful pressure that made everything go back underground for another 6 months. He didn't say anything. He just stood there. I made 3 trips to the car. Poppy carried the roll basket, which she considered a very important job. I buckled her in. I pulled out of the driveway. Nobody came outside. My mother was watching the Macy's parade when we got to her house in New Albany. She saw Poppy come running through the door and came into the entryway and stopped when she saw both my hands full, a covered pie in each. Good Lord, what is all this? Thanksgiving, I said. She gave me one long look, the kind that reads a whole paragraph in 2 seconds, and said, Sit down, I'll put the kettle on. I told her everything at the kitchen table while Poppy watched the end of the parade in the living room. My mother listened without making sounds of outrage, which is one of her greatest gifts. When I finished, she sat quietly for a moment. Then she said, We'll need more chairs. She called my Aunt Deb, who lives 10 minutes away. Aunt Deb called my cousin Wesley, who'd been planning to eat frozen lasagna alone at his apartment. Wesley called his girlfriend. By the time the turkey finished reheating, there were 7 of us around a table built for 5. Nobody asked if the rolls were dense. Nobody mentioned an ex-girlfriend's recipe. Wesley had 2 slices of the apple pie and said it was the best thing he'd eaten all year. And he said it the way people say things when they actually mean them. For the first time that day I laughed. A real one. I was washing dishes when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window over the sink, I watched Lucas get out. His coat was on wrong, one collar up, one down. He looked like he'd driven fast and hadn't noticed. My mother let him in before he could knock. She offered him a plate. He said no thank you. She offered him coffee. He said sure and sat down at the kitchen table with a mug he didn't touch. After a few minutes, he found me. Can we talk? We stood on my mother's back porch. Cold Ohio November cold, the kind that finds the gap at your collar. There was a string of solar lights along the fence she'd put up last summer and never taken down. They were on. Lucas leaned against the railing. You should have said something. I did, I said, tonight. He was quiet for a moment. I've been saying something for 6 years, I said. Not loudly, just clearly. Small things. And every time the message I got back was that I was too sensitive. Or that's just how she is. Or you just need to give her more time. He looked at the lights. I know. Do you? The 2 words sat there between us. He exhaled. Yeah, I know. And the way he said it, not explaining, not defending, just admitting, was different from every other version of this conversation we'd ever had. Something in him had moved. I could feel it. Being here, he said, nodding toward the warm, loud kitchen behind us. It's different. This is what it's supposed to feel like, I said. He didn't answer that. He didn't need to. We were standing there, not talking, when his phone rang. It was his uncle. I watched Lucas's face go from guarded to still. What happened? Is he okay? How bad? He looked at me. Dad burned himself. He tried to cook something on the stove. He hasn't cooked in 30 years. His hand, he listened. Yeah, we're on our way. He hung up. My dad burned his hand pretty bad. My uncle took him to urgent care. I didn't ask any questions. I got my keys. We got there around 7. Warren was on the couch with his right hand wrapped, looking sheepish in the specific way of a man who has done something he considers embarrassing. Cassie was beside him. Linda was on the phone in the kitchen. The house smelled faintly of scorched butter. When Warren saw me come through the door, his whole face relaxed. Warren, I said, let me see. It's not that bad. You went to urgent care. Well, he looked at his hand. I sat beside him and looked it over. A decent burn across his palm, 1st degree edging into 2nd along one side. They'd wrapped it correctly at the clinic. He'd be fine. What were you making? I asked. He looked genuinely embarrassed. For Linda. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. I looked at him for a long moment. This quiet man who had eaten my too sweet buckle and said something kind about it. Who had, in 6 years, never once found fault with anything I'd brought to this house. I'll make something, I said. Sit tight. The refrigerator had eggs, butter, roasted vegetables from the day before, a block of cheddar. I made a frittata, toasted some bread, found a small container of the cranberry sauce I'd left behind by accident and set it on the table without comment. Cassie appeared in the kitchen doorway while I was cooking. She stood there for a while, watching. Then, Stella. Yeah. I'm sorry about today. A pause. About the Ryan thing. I do that and I don't always hear how it sounds from the outside. But that's not a good excuse. I kept stirring. Is it a habit? I asked. She was quiet. I think, yeah, maybe. Ryan was around for a while when we were younger and my mom liked her, and I just never stopped to think about what it was like to be you listening to that. I turned to look at her. She wasn't performing this. Her face was too uncomfortable for that. Thank you for saying it, I said. Do you hate me? The question surprised me. I almost smiled. No, I've never hated you. She let out a slow breath. Okay, good. A pause. The rolls were really good for what it's worth. I had one before you left. I did smile then, though she couldn't see it. After dinner, we sat in the living room. Warren was more comfortable. Linda was quieter than I'd ever seen her. At some point, after Cassie stepped away to take a call, Linda looked at me. She didn't say anything right away, just looked at her hands in her lap. I don't know how to start, she finally said. You don't have to, I told her. I want to. She took a breath. I've always been very aware of how things look. I grew up without much, and when you grow up like that, you spend the rest of your life worrying about appearances. Whether the food is good enough, whether the house looks right to everyone who walks through the door. She paused. I think I forget sometimes that the people inside the house matter more than the opinions of the people coming through it. The room was quiet. The TV played something neither of us was watching. I didn't mean to make you feel compared, she said. Ryan is just a name I say without thinking I should think. She looked up at me. I know it doesn't fix 6 years. No, I said, but it's a start. Later, when Linda had gone upstairs and Cassie was in the kitchen, Warren caught my eye from across the room. He waited until it was just the two of us for a moment. Lucas had taken Poppy to find her giraffe, which had gotten wedged under the couch cushions, and then he said quietly, I should have said something a long time ago. Warren, I heard things over the years. I told myself it wasn't my place. He looked at his wrapped hand like it was evidence of something. But this is my house. You're my family. It was my place. His voice was rough and careful at the same time. I'm sorry, Stella. In 6 years of Sundays and holidays and birthdays and dinners, my father-in-law had never once spoken to me that directly, that personally. I didn't trust my voice for a moment. Thank you, I finally said. Just that. It was enough. We stayed until 9. Driving home with Poppy asleep in her car seat, Lucas reached over and put his hand on mine. I'm going to do better, he said. I know, I said. I meant it. Not blindly. I'd stopped being blind about 6 years of marriage ago. But I'd heard something tonight in how he'd stood in that kitchen doorway and not asked me to put the food back. Something small but real, like a door that had been stuck finally coming loose. Some things take longer than they should. The question is whether they happen at all. The holidays moved on the way they do. November became December. We hosted Christmas at our house for the first time, partly my suggestion, partly Lucas's. Linda stood in my kitchen for a while, and at some point picked up a dish towel and started helping without being asked. We worked side by side, handing each other things, and it was almost easy. In January, my mother's furnace broke and she stayed with us for 3 nights. On the second evening, she and Linda ended up at the kitchen table after dinner, talking for 2 hours about their own mothers, what they'd inherited, what they'd tried not to pass on, what they'd passed on anyway, without meaning to. I didn't listen in, but I heard laughing at some point. It surprised me and then it didn't. The following Thanksgiving, I was in my kitchen again Wednesday night. Same turkey, same cranberries, same 2 pies, same socks, same apron. My phone rang around 9. It was Linda. I'm bringing stuffed mushrooms, she said. I stopped. The ones Ryan's mother used to make. I tracked down the recipe. I've been meaning to try it for years. A beet. Do you mind if I bring them? Something moved in my chest, gently. I don't mind at all, I said. A short pause. Then, I thought I'd bring them to your mother's, if that's all right. You mentioned she does Thanksgiving. I set down the basting brush. She would love that, I said. And she did. That Thursday, my mother's kitchen was full. Aunt Deb, my cousin Wesley, Linda and Warren, Cassie and Todd, Lucas and me and Poppy. 2 tables pushed together. Every chair in the house plus 2 folding ones from the garage. Linda's stuffed mushrooms came out perfectly. She was flushed with something that looked a lot like happiness when people asked for the recipe. Poppy sat on Warren's lap and fed him bites of her roll, and he ate every single one. At some point during dinner, my mother said something to Linda that made her laugh so hard, she had to set down her wine glass. I watched it all from my corner seat. The mismatched chairs and the borrowed folding table, and the room that smelled like sage and butter and people who had figured out, slowly and imperfectly, how to show up for each other. I thought about the year before. How I'd driven 45 minutes to a house where I felt like a product that hadn't passed inspection. How I'd driven home with everything still in my car. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because I was finally too tired to pretend the feeling wasn't there. Sometimes the smallest act, quietly taking back something that wasn't being appreciated, is the only way to show people what they had been taking for granted all along. The cranberry sauce went around the table twice. Poppy declared it was her favorite food in the world. You can thank your mom for that, Warren said. Simply to the table, to no one in particular, just saying a true thing. I put my hand over Poppy's, and she squeezed my fingers, and outside the window the afternoon light was going gold through the bare November trees. And it was the best Thanksgiving I could remember.